Good morning. Just a continuation here of the Divine Code. Today we're going to do the Divine Code section on the laws of murder. But before that, I wanted to do a probably a shorter video to address some things. My tendency is sometimes to go on tangents while discussing one topic, so I decided to maybe try to take those tangents and where the tangents I thought that I would be hitting and make a separate video. So just a couple things here. The first thing really is to understand Halacha and specifically the goals of these Divine Code videos in terms of Halacha, and then also to discuss general advice. So basically, the way Halacha works, what Halacha is, Halacha comes from the word, comes from the meaning of going, which is, alright, so you study a lot of Torah, but how do you actually go? How do you wake up in the morning and live your life? In Shulchan Aruch, which is the basic halachic codification upon which everything else is really based on, it's divided into 4 sections, and one of them is called, which really deals with the day-to-day, is called the way of life, Orach Chaim, the way of life. So that's really what halacha is. So that means you study a lot of Tanakh, Talmud, Mishnah, and you want to know how to actually live by it. And basically that's where halacha comes from. So a few important things here. So we know that the oral Torah was never written down, and then because it was going to be forgotten, it was. Now, when they wrote it down, so they wanted to keep things within the framework of the oral Torah, meaning they wanted to keep things where it continues from teacher to student, all the way going back to Moshe. And the term Rav is master, right? It's a rabbi is not a source of inspiration, although he does inspire. A rabbi is first and foremost a master because the student is accepting from the master's tradition from Moshe. It's not that the master is like offering insights where the student accepts if he agrees, or the master is smarter than the student, so therefore the student sees how his master is right. The idea is that the master has a job to do to give over what he got from his master, and the student needs to be coming with a mindset of accepting it. So that's the idea of how the Masorah works. So even when the Mishnah was written down, the idea was not to switch to a book version where anyone could now read it and not need to have a master. It was written down in almost like what you would say like Rashi Prakim. It was written down almost where very little was written down, but just enough that it could prevent the Torah from being forgotten. Meaning, they see that in the next generations, the Torah students are going to have a harder time just going with remembering everything. So therefore, now we're going to start writing down certain things that will help the next generations not forget the Torah. And of course, everything they wrote down, they had a Sanhedrin, a halachic Sanhedrin, which had all the rulings, and basically that was the Mishnah. But of course, this didn't happen by accident. The Mishnah was inherently meant to only be a few words that really contain a lot more. As we know, the Torah, the sea of Torah is immeasurable. And of course, then you have, so the next students who are learning from teachers, and now there's this binding text in the background. So now it's sort of a hybrid study between the text of the Mishnah and the rabbis who you are learning from. And that's the Talmud, that's the study going on in the Talmud. So they had teachers and then they had the text, and it was like that type of study. And then after the Talmud was sealed, so now the text, and now basically the way it worked after the Talmud was the same concept. that they wrote down the Talmud again to also for Torah students who are going to have a hard time keeping track of the whole oral law through memory. So they wrote down certain things in the Talmud. It's written a lot. There's a lot more written in the Talmud than in the Mishnah, but it's the same idea still, that you still need to have a master who teaches over to you and you accept from him, but it's also done with the text of the Talmud. That's really where after the Talmud is sealed, you have the different rabbis who are now teaching to their students, of course the text of the Talmud is coming in. So now in the Talmud though, and the Mishnah also, the Mishnah a lot of times will tell you, and this is who the law is by. This is the ruling of the Sanhedrin. The Talmud, that's not so common. It does occur, but not always, and therefore, there's, like, on the surface, if someone would just read the Talmud, there would be he would be left with many questions. He would not know how to live practically, and that's really where you have already in the times of the Gaonim before the Rishonim, where people have the Talmud, but they don't know how to take that to practical life. So they would send questions to the Gaonim or to other rabbis who lived across the world. But the Gaonim were like the primary seat of Torah, and so then you have answers written by Gaonim. We have many of them today, where they're telling this community what is the halacha l'maisa, what is the actual way to live by what the Talmud says. And then even after that, there's still, as the generations go down, there's Yerida Sadoros, there's a degradation of the generations, and then you get to the Rishonim, so where there's even people are even more confused, and there was a lot of dispersions, and so there was just a lot of people trying to understand how to live halachically in their practical life, and therefore the Rambam wrote a lot with this in mind. A lot of the reasons why you don't find in the Rambam or the other Rishonim or the Gaonim esoterics and deeper parts of Judaism, which really only became more accessible in writings later on, is because as part of the oral Torah, we were not supposed to reveal even the public oral Torah. It was only written down because it was necessary, and people won't know how to live their lives. And for the esoteric part of it, you have opposing concerns, and therefore even before anything the oral Torah was written down, the esoteric part of Judaism was always even more shrouded and not really given in public discourse. There's halachos on that this part of esoterics can only be taught to one person, not in front of two people. There were all these laws that already existed even before the Mishnah was written down. So that's why the Rambam didn't write his Sfarim to put out esoterics out there. That was not supposed to be revealed. That was not supposed to be revealed in public writings. It came out later on, but at the time of the Gaonim, the Rambam, the Rif, there's a saying from the Gaonim, Ein Meshivin ala Gados. You have a part of the Talmud which is not, like, so to speak, halachic. It's much more cryptic. It seems like stories or sayings. A lot of it is really the esoteric part of the Torah, and the hidden in a simple phrasing, and people would have a question: what does this mean? And the Gaonim would answer that we don't answer Agados. We're not here to. We're sending out letters to the communities to help them live practically. We're not going to send a letter explaining all of Kabbalah to a community that wants to understand. If you really want to understand these esoteric sayings, you need to be a Torah scholar and come to a rabbi who can teach you. It's not something we're going to put out in the public discourse. People want to know, so what really happened later on. Some information came out into writings. That topic is not for now. So basically, the idea of halacha always was how to live practically, but it was also always done as much as possible to still to not like put out information where it's not possible for where it's just enough to make people not forget the Torah, not forget the oral Torah, but still, you need to have a teacher. I think during the Rambam's time there was some controversies, and it was a whole, there was many controversies, but one of them was really that other rabbis felt that the Rambam's writing were too clear. And basically, you could have this problem where people could think that they could just read the Rambam and not have a teacher. But obviously, there's a lot more to that. But that's just really, in a really, really simple, there's a lot more nuance to that. But on a really, really simple level, that's just a historical anecdote. But basically, so halacha today. So let's talk about Jewish people, and the Noachide community is relatively young, and I think that in time a lot of these things that exist by the Jewish people could also occur in the Noachide community. So the first way that, and really the fundamental way that Jews know how to live, how to have a halacha, how to go in life, is because they're raised in a Jewish home. So basically, a Jewish child knows we don't drive on Shabbos. He doesn't know where it says it in the Torah. He doesn't know where it says it in the Mishnah and the Talmud and everything else in between. But he knows we don't drive on Shabbos. So as he gets older, he doesn't need to find out, can he drive on Shabbos? Of course, as part of his commandment to do Torah study, he does need to study all the laws and everything. But he already knows not to drive on Shabbos. He already knows you wear tzitzis. He already knows you have a mezuzah on the house. He already knows that on Pesach we don't eat chametz. He already knows that on Shabbos we can't do X, Y, and Z. He knows that we go to shul 3 times a day. He knows that his father puts on tefillin. He knows that when he turns 13 he'll have a bar mitzvah and he'll put on tefillin. So he knows that on Shabbos we can't, I said that already, he can't do X, Y, and Z. On Sukkot we sit in the Sukkah. So there's a lot of parts. He knows he goes to buy esrog before Sukkot. He sees his father looking at the esrog closely to see, to look, whatever those halachas are of how to determine whether an esrog is kosher. And he asks his father, "What are you looking for?" And his father tells him, and now he knows, like, okay, so when I go buy an esrog, I'll look for X, Y, and Z. So there's many, many, many things that a child can pick up just from being at home without even having the scholarship. And obviously, usually the greater the father is in stature, both in piousness and in Torah study, Torah scholarship, so the more the child can have. Another part of this is obviously also the traditions. We were at Har Sinai, and we went through the Exodus, and these things also come from both the mother and the father. We have in Proverbs, listen to the mussar of your father, and don't forget let go of the Torah of your mother. So it's called chinuch, educating children. And this is a huge subject. I'm not going into it, obviously, but this is really, and the whole thing with tradition is also, I'm talking more halachically, but basically this is like the primary way a child picks up, the fundamentals of halacha. And then another thing on top of that is that as he gets an education, he said there are many classes and sfarim written that lay things out very practically. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. Also, not like going into the exact Torah scholarship underlying it, just written for laymen or just even Torah scholars who want to get a knowledge of the basics. Here are the concepts. Here are what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and then but the thing with halacha is that there's so much nuance, even on a practical level, because the underlying understandings will have many different nuances in how they play out on a practical level. And that's before you get into the many opinions and things like that. So therefore, someone doing that also is not really allowed to, unless this is something that's like clear as the sun. You're not really supposed to, like, just have a book and go with it. If like there's even if there's even an ounce of confusion, it's better to always have the classes that you attend and have a rabbi that you always ask questions to. I myself have I'm not an ordained rabbi as much as I've learned in yeshiva a lot. I have many different rabbis, and I have rabbis and where I ask them halacha questions all the time. It's a very simple question: yes, no, can I do this? Can I not do this? Should I do this? How do I do this? This is not like please explain to me within a half an hour of your time all the Torah scholarship underlying this. That's not the question. That's not the mindset of the question. It's this rabbi accepts upon himself the responsibility to give people time and to answer people's questions. He's not accepting it on himself the responsibility to, this rabbi, other rabbis might. These rabbis are poskim on a really practical level. They're giving people practical knowledge. So it's better always as someone to have such a source. And again, that's for practical knowledge. And then on top of that, there's someone who has a rabbi like that and does attend a lot of classes. He'll know a lot of concepts. He'll know a lot of what's absolutely clear, and he'll also have a lot of understanding of of general halacha that will allow him to realize that he needs to ask a question. So people, if you don't study halacha, like the practical halacha, you won't even know to have a question where you think it's fine because you don't even know that there's an issue. So that's another thing where you study halacha. Sometimes you're gonna hear something in a class or see it in a sefer, and then you're good to go. But just amassing a lot of halachic knowledge allows people to be aware that they need to ask a question, and not just do it and then not realize that there was a whole issue and they may have done something wrong. And then once you really get past that, then we start getting into learning halacha, which is you start learning the Talmud and the Mishnah, where it comes from in Tanakh, and everything really comes from the Chumash, the 5 books of Moshe, as you call it, and basically and then getting into the whole topic and learning it, and then seeing how it's codified by the Rishonim, and then the later commentaries, and up till today. Especially, there's a lot of modern questions that were never specifically spoken about by a Rishon or the Talmud, and the poskim today need to basically, based on their understanding of those commentaries and the Talmud, address a question that arises now with some modern technology or something. And that's really the other class of poskim, not the ones you text to get or you call to get a yes or no answer. It's really the sages of the generation, and who have smicha, which is not the Sanhedrin smicha, and even the other class of poskim have smicha, but you have the great sages who have smicha from the great sages before them, and they are the ones who they get a question from a rabbi of a community who sends it to this great rabbi. Please address this monumental question in halacha, and he'll write a whole long what's called a tshuva on it, and issuing his opinion. And then there could be more discourse. Other great rabbis might send him their opinions, and that's what people who learn halacha in order to become even the posek who can answer questions, they study what these great sages say, and it's really not two classes. It's just the amount of scholarship. So a posek who's doesn't feel like he's on the stature where he's a great posek, he won't issue those rulings. He'll ask someone else. He'll ask one of those rabbis to issue the ruling. But both of these poskim, both of these, so to speak, categories are really not two categories where each one, is different. It's really more scholarship and greater Torah authority, and recognized Torah authority by the world, because this other person is not as of a great sage as the other one, and that's when he'll defer to the other one on a great question. But they're both studying the same topics, the same Talmud, the same chuvos and opinions of the other commentaries, and basically that's the world of the poskim, especially today. So you have like the different Rishonim, and then the Shulchan Aruch, who was Rabbi Yosef Karo, he really ruled based on the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rush. The Rush also incorporated a lot of. He came from Germany and he fled because of persecution to Spain, so he influenced a lot of Sephardi halacha with the opinions of the Ashkenazi commentators, and that really, because of that really brought Ashkenazi and Sephardi halacha much closer, because now the Sephardi Rabbanim, the Sephardi rabbis, kind of also had from the Rosh, who was then a great rabbi in Spain after he got there. So he influenced a lot of Sephardi halacha with those Ashkenazi opinions, which when the Shulchan Aruch was written, 200 years later or so, there's much less argument. Whereas if you go with just Rashi versus the Rambam, there's a lot more differences. I think the Yemenites, for a long time, the Yemenite community went strictly with the Rambam, and they have greater differences with the Ashkenazi poskim. Although I think that in the 19th and 20th centuries they started coming closer. But that's a historical topic that's not for now. So one of the jobs that the great poskim really handle is, again, you have the new questions that that arise now that were never addressed. Then also, how do you? So you have the Talmud, and then you have the Rashi and the Rambam. So what are you going to do? Come on yourself and just, I'm going to rule based on how I read the Talmud. And again, Torah study is still always going from master to student. So, you can't really make such a jump yourself, aside from the fact that it's stupid, because it's foolishness to think that you could argue on Rashi and the Rambam. You really have to be an idiot to think so. The Vilna Gaon is said to have been considered a Rishon in stature, and so it's not set in stone, but it basically is. And so therefore, how do you rule practically? So you could kind of look at it ironically. So the Rambam is writing to help people live practically out of the Talmud, and all the other commentators are doing the same, and now you don't know what to do because you have all these different commentators. So it's not like nobody knew what to do for 300 years until somebody codified it. So then this rabbi was the rabbi of this town, so that they followed his rulings. They followed, the rabbi of that town followed their rulings. But then as the rabbi passes away, and halacha the opinions get more numerous, and there's a lot here to unpack. But basically, if there's a community where it's a newer community, they don't have an established way of doing things, so whose opinion do they go by? So if there's an Ashkenazi community, they're definitely going to go with with the Ashkenazi poskim. But even among the Ashkenazi poskim, Rashi and the Balei Tosfos, they have differing opinions. So therefore, part of the job of the poskim is to really ascertain who to go by. And the good thing is that a posik today doesn't need to make a choice between Rashi and the Balei Tosfos, because the poskim before him already made choices, but now some of them made different choices. So how do you decide? And all these choices are being made based on Torah scholarship and understanding, and there's a lot more that goes into this. It's very complicated how it works, schematically. but that's the job of a poskim today. When you're getting to something that was already that's not a new question. Usually it's just a matter of looking at the prior commentators and really seeing well, I'm not a postic, I can't tell you exactly, but basically it's already been handled in-house, so to speak. So I mean, you have different communities. So the Sephardi poskim will look at how the Sephardi Rabbanim handled the older arguments, and the Ashkenazi Rabbanim will do the same thing. And then there's different areas. You have the Ukrainian rabbis, the Polish rabbis, the rabbis in Hungary. For every era, there's how really the great sages of that area ruled, and that's really how it descends to the next generations. But basically, when you have new questions, there's a lot more scholarship on that, because that's something that you really need to have a Torah sage really base his opinions on how he understands the prior Torah scholarship and how to apply that to this question. So there's always really mostly settled halacha, and then new halacha that addresses new questions. But it's all based on going back to the oral Torah, but that's so. This is who the great poskim. This is what the great poskim do, and even as I said, I guess the younger or less scholarly class of poskim, they're really doing the same thing, but they know their limits, so therefore whatever question that is really requires greater scholarship is sent to those great rabbis. Now, so that's really halacha, how it exists in the Jewish community. So with regards to the Noachide community, that's really what I'm trying to do here with the Divine Code. So Rabbi Moshe Weiner in the Divine Code is doing a lot of giving over the basic halacha concepts and also issuing a lot of rulings. And he's doing that because there's not really been, so to speak, posting for Noachide law in a comprehensive way. A lot of what he does is find, base his opinion on how he understands things, incorporating how for every Noachide subject of Torah, so to speak, there's a lot of discourse. What's really new for Noachides is that it's never been written comprehensively. It just comes up in a lot of discourse. It's not like, the Torah of the laws of a Noachide are, they're Talmudic topics and have been studied for ever since the Talmud was written. You don't skip it, right? They're of course addressed. There's just never been, aside from the Rambam, there's never really been comprehensive codification of practical halacha. It's always been scholarly, because it's never really been relevant. So you have a lot of Torah scholarship, but then you have the Rishonim writing, okay, this is the law, and they do that for Noachides, but sometimes, not always, but never in a comprehensive way. And that's really, so the Divine Code is coming to issue rulings, which there are not as many as you have by Jewish law, where it's clear, this is what you should do, and also put it down very comprehensively. I'm not a postic, so I'm just coming to do kind of the other levels we spoke about, and many Noachides say they don't have, they weren't raised in a home where they could, oh yeah, I knew that since I was 5, that's how we do it. So it's basically from reading Sfarim and going to classes, you could start gaining a lot of knowledge about the basic precepts, and then attending get more classes, and you get more familiar with the precepts, and you start knowing things that are clear as day, and knowing things that now you should ask a question about it. And then when we talk about Noachide courts, so those are going to be people who are able to, in conjunction, there's going to, I'm pretty sure Rabbi Weiner speaks about it, how it's going to work, because the Torah is, so to speak, the property of the Jews. I don't know if, I'm pretty sure that the Noachide courts won't be able to be independent of the rabbis, because the whole Torah is really one thing. So every halachic ruling, is really, it's not like there's not like these 3 pages are standalone and they're like whatever it says elsewhere is not really going to be relevant. In order to be a great halachic sage and the Seiser, you really need to have a complete mastery of the Torah, and therefore I don't think that the Noachide courts are ever going to be able to be like independent of rabbis. But what it's going to be is really, really knowledgeable Noachides who are very, very close to the great halachic poskim and have a really comprehensive understanding of the nuances of Noachide halacha, and are therefore able to answer questions, yes, no, how do I do this? And it's going to be probably similar to what you have in the Jewish world, where you have the great poskim, then you have like people who are very, very learning a lot of halacha, and then maybe one day will be a posik, but right now, they refer any big questions to the great poskim, and as they're doing that, as they're growing in their scholarship, they're more and more able to handle questions independently. I don't think that the Noachide courts, I'm not sure, I don't think they'll be able to like basically be the exact same thing, because there's a certain like line where they won't be able to cross on their own. But as much as possible, they'll be able to retain a great comprehensive knowledge of the many, many, many nuances, as we'll see. I'll point out in different areas, and therefore for practical questions, they'll be able to answer them. To other Noachides who have questions, and they'll be able to issue rulings in court. This is a little bit unclear to me exactly how this is going to work, but the part about how they're going to still be in conjunction with the great rabbis, that's I don't think that's very clear. So the point of the Divine Code videos are to really, we spoke about a lot of the fundamentals of faith, but really to give everyone basic concepts, and as much as possible to make some certain basic concepts as clear as day, and also maybe if we're able to help people amass knowledge that will enable them to ask the questions of a proper authority when they need to, that will be amazing. And the key point I want to make is that even if you have the book of the Divine Code and you read it a lot, you need to also attend classes, and we don't rule based on a book. It's not, especially these type of books, we don't really Jews don't have like a practical book and like that's it. You also need to have a posek who you're in touch with. We spoke other times about everyone needs to have a rabbi. That's even broader. That's in terms of spiritual growth and much more. But definitely you have to have someone who could answer halachic questions, who you're in touch with, who knows you, and could give you yes or no answers, how you're supposed to do something. That's important. People shouldn't substitute that for anything. Okay. I mean, listen, if someone's stuck on an island and he only has the Divine Code, he only has what he has. But there's much more. There are rabbis who made themselves accessible to the Noachide community, and people won't be able to. This also just applies to just study of law. This applies to Jews and Noachides. Jews or Noachides won't be able to get to heaven and say like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't supposed to do that." It's like, well, I mean, if you were born in Antarctica and you never heard of anything, okay, fine. Obviously, Hashem's justice is perfect and it's pure and it's just and it fits exactly the person's ability. But in today's day and age, there's an ability. They sell the books in the Jewish bookstore. There are rabbis who are accessible. So, there's no excuse for. That's not going to be an excuse that I didn't know. If you were learning and trying and studying and working on it, then maybe you didn't hear of something, fine. But if someone is not applying himself to understand the nuances as much as possible of the Noachide law and to gain how he's supposed to live practically, gain that knowledge, then it's that excuse probably will not be accepted as far as I know. And this applies to Jews as well. I mean, Jews they have to follow the Torah. A Jew says, "Oh, I didn't know." Well, were you attending classes? Were you trying to understand how you're supposed to do it, how you're supposed to live? Oh, you weren't, so then what do you expect? Of course you didn't know. So that's a point I wanted to make there. Right. Okay. A second topic I wanted to talk about was advice, right? So this is important. Basically, the Torah says you shouldn't place a stumbling block in front of a blind man. I'm not sure if that verse applies to Noachide or not, but in general, there's an idea here that you're accountable for your actions, and you're accountable for your actions. And don't ask me what does accountable mean. How exactly butterfly effect? How exactly is that? Hashem's justice is perfect. Hashem knows exactly how much to attribute to you and everything like that. But the point is, you're accountable for your actions. If someone asks a question and you just give him bad advice, off the top of your head, without saying, but maybe ask somebody, or saying maybe I don't know, because you don't know, you thought about it for 6 seconds, and then it turns out to be really bad advice. You were lazy in answering the question. You could have said, I don't know, or if maybe you did have that knowledge in your brain, you didn't think about the question properly. The first thing a rabbi, if someone's a real rabbi, the first sign of a real rabbi is if he is able to say, I don't know. Right? You have Rashi, amazing. Rashi will tell you in a verse, I don't know what this verse is coming to say. Right? Rashi will say that. Right? I don't know how to explain it in Pshat, right? So Rashi says that sometimes. The most important thing is that we're not here to achieve. We're not contractors. We don't have a mission to complete, and we don't need to sacrifice for that mission, right? We're here to do as much as we can. So therefore, it's quality over quantity, always, right? And it's about the absolute truth. And it's about, obviously, you're not God, so basically if someone asks you for advice and, you want to help him, and you think you could help him, and you do your best, that's something you should do. As much as possible, God obviously is not going to expect everyone to be perfect, but the idea is, you really did the proper, it's called hishtadlus, and basically, and even if you do that proper hishtadlus and you recognize that you don't have the credentials enough, you're not scholarly enough, or it's a different issue, and you don't have a proper knowledge of psychology or therapy, or you just don't have the tools to properly answer this question, it's best to really, not just best, it's really would be wrong if someone does just throw out advice. You might say that, well, that's what I would think, but I don't really know. You should ask somebody, right? Maybe that could sometimes work in some cases. I sometimes do that, but really in general, words have impacts, and our actions have great impacts, and we're accountable for them, and we need to do them thinking properly and weighing the consequences, and not just acting like a cow that turns its head every time the train whizzes by. We need to be in control of ourselves and always be thinking before we act, and be orderly and following a process, and not just being just acting without thinking. Like sometimes someone might get to heaven and say, well, I wasn't really thinking when I did that, I just did it out of habit. I didn't think I'm gonna go do that bad thing. It just happened. So, well, yeah, and that's true, but the question is, well, why weren't you, why was that situation where you were just acting out of habit and you were just acting without thinking? That's not an excuse. Don't be like that. We'll work on it. In general, it's best. The status quo is be silent, and then establish that you're supposed to answer the question. That you should answer the question. You could answer the question. You want to basically to yourself. You want to assume to everything that you're going to avoid danger, avoid messing up, avoid doing a bad thing. And unless you know that your advice, unless you think reasonably that your advice will be helpful and so to speak, then you should act. The rabbis in Pirkei Avos say the protection for wisdom is silence. Right? It's best to always, you see, by the great rabbis, the Brisker Rav was very famous to say, I don't know. And trust me, he knew a lot more than most people. But he was very, very makbid, very, very strict to not send someone down a wrong path. Interestingly, there's a famous story that somebody came to him and asked him a question about a marriage proposal, and other rabbis do answer such questions often, and I guess he had an opinion that he was going to be stricter to be stricter to make sure he knows he had like whatever this was. This is not like something that everyone needs to do, because there's many other rabbis who did answer questions, but for whatever the reason, he was really, really strict about not giving out advice. And this person asked him a marriage proposal, and he told him, he said, I don't usually answer such questions. So he said, the person started crying and said that, he's an orphan, both his parents died in the Holocaust. And so the second he said that, so the halacha changed completely. So the Brisker Rav said, oh, you're an orphan? You could come to me anytime with any question you have. Right? So the whole thing was a halachic approach. For a regular person, you have an obligation to help other people, and you also have an obligation for, you also have a different obligation, whereas, to be more accountable on yourself and make sure it's good advice. Again, I'm not going to go into the opinion of the Brisker Rav on this. I'm not saying, I don't want anyone to take away that that's like the practical thing to never give advice, because he never said people should do that, and he clearly that was something that he did. But we see everyone else always would answer questions if they could, and he had some sort of stringency that he kept for himself. It's very famous. He would tell people not to try to imitate him. He wasn't interested. It was just a personal thing that he had. But basically, to tell people, like you hear today, that the Brisker Rav told someone he can ask him any question and he'll give him an answer. Right? It's like you won the lottery. That's how valued the Brisker Rav's advice was whenever he would give it. But the idea was that now with the orphan, or with the convert, you have an obligation to go much higher than normal for that person. So then suddenly the halacha changed, and now he answers his questions. But in general, like people need to know where they're holding. They need to know what they do know, what they don't know. They need to know that the Torah is vast as a sea, and most people don't know anything. So if someone doesn't know anything, he shouldn't talk. Instead of talking and then realizing 8 months later that he was wrong, or maybe he'll never realize it. So the Torah encompasses everything, and if someone doesn't know the Torah, you shouldn't just like have an opinion on something. Well, what does the Torah say about it, right? What does Tanakh say about it? What does the Mishnah, the Talmud, what does the Masorah say about it? That's the proper way of looking at everything. That's really how a proper student of the Torah looks at everything. Is how does the Torah view this issue? And like for me, I know that well, and I know that the Torah has an opinion here, and usually I don't know what its opinion is, or I might like have like a hint based on my scholarship what it might hold based on what it says here or there, but I don't have a halachic ruling on what the Torah's opinion would be. That's what the poskim have. They could give you a practical ruling based on all the different things it says about what is the Torah's opinion on this issue, and the idea that just everyone just says whatever they want and thinks they know everything, it's really foolishness, and it comes from people not understanding, like what the Torah is and how everything is in the Torah, and how, because if you tell someone, well, it says what you're saying is against a verse in Leviticus, I would never say that, right? So people, it's not, I don't really think it's coming from bad faith. It's just people don't have an understanding of what the Torah is. And with greater Torah study, you see, the more Torah study someone does, the more apt he is to like be reserved in his opinions and recognize where he is, and have greater fear of God, and understand that he doesn't understand, because he sees just how great the sea of Torah is. This happens many times in yeshiva. You're like positive of something, and then you see that like you don't know nothing, you don't know anything. What you thought Rashi says, Rashi doesn't say. What you thought the Talmud says, the Talmud doesn't say. What you thought Tosas says, the Tosas doesn't say. And the reason why you didn't understand that is because you really don't have any Torah scholarship. You don't even know the next page, so you're basing everything you're reading is, okay, now I have an opinion. Well, do you know what it says on the next page and how that needs to bear in the understanding of this page? And you don't, and then you find out because you looked at one of the commentaries and you realize, boy, I don't understand anything here. I need to go learn it again. Part of the Talmudic lectures that happened is that we would prepare the Talmud. We would look at the commentaries. We would prepare before the semester, like the general chapter, to try to really, you want to get a breadth, so you're not missing like obvious basic information. Then you want to begin to get your own depth of understanding, and then you go into the lecture and you think you have everything, and then the rabbi will ask 9 or 10 questions that just blow up everything you think you know, and after those 10 questions you realize you don't know anything, and now you need to go back and start again, and then the lecture slowly continue leading you through the sugya, the topic, and obviously, I think you could say that yeshiva study is really more teaching you how to learn, and then now you're equipped with those tools, then you could go on in your 20s and 30s and learn, obviously. But a lot of what yeshiva study is how to learn, how to study, but it was always fun when the rabbi would just blow apart everything I thought I knew with 7 pointed questions I had missed. And the idea is that you go over, you review and see how come you missed them and try not to miss them next time. But that's really going off topic. But again, just generally, just to clarify halacha, and also to really drive home the point of being careful with giving advice, and just making sure your opinions are in accordance with the Torah. Basically, if a great rabbi will say something, well, he said it and he knows the Torah, so I could follow him, and that's what Jews do. Any opinions I have are all like, okay, so this is what this rabbi said. This is how he rules on this issue, and I know that my scholarship doesn't compare to his at all. I'm a pebble, I'm a piece of sand compared to him, and therefore this is the ruling of whatever this question is. And that should be really everyone's mindset once you really get an understanding of just how everything is in the Torah, and how deep, so to speak, the Torah is. And on the first point, really the goals of these Divine Core videos are really to give people basic knowledge, hopefully even enable them to have enough knowledge so that they could ask the questions that need to be asked as they begin to gain a lot of information. And with that, we're going to move to the video on the laws of murder.